Oh God, you know who's there?
Oh.
Phyllis, Joan, and Aaron.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Woodstock's special meeting. This is not our regular monthly business meeting. So we're not going to be taking up anything, applications or anything like that. This is for February 2nd, 2023, whatever time you have, Amy, for us to call the order. And then I'll just check. David, Dwight, Doug, you can hear us and see us online, okay?
Yes.
Yes,
And Doug, you can hear and see us?
Yes.
And we'll do a roll call. Tim, do you mind starting us?
Tim Young, Mark Blackmer, Joseph Adaletta, Jeffrey Markoff, Joe Palulik.
And then online, I'll just say your name and just say yes or here. David Morse,
here.
Doug Porter,
Here.
Dwight Reinowitz.
Here.
Excellent. And I'll just ask people other than commissioners, if you can just keep yourself on mute, so that way we don't pick up too much background noise with things online. That takes us to designation of alternates, trying to still go through things in an order as far as keeping track of who is seated when and for what. So I have it listed that Doug Porter, you're up next to be seated. Okay, so we'll note that for the record. So, and then we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. The report will be very quick. Thank you, everybody, for commissioners for continuing to attend our meetings. And remember, we have a meeting in 2 weeks. Just let us know if you can't attend, but we should be able to have a quorum, and the agenda should be coming out in meeting packets next week. If you haven't been getting your meeting packet, if you wanted it mailed, just let Dan know. Otherwise, if you've asked him just to leave it out front, just leaving them out front. And he also put stuff up, the meeting documents, if you needed to get access to them, including any last minute things. If you're not here at the meeting, you continue to put them up online. The other is, unfortunately, Scrambles the duck saw his shadow, so we're going to have 6 more weeks of winter. I have no idea what the groundhog saw. Didn't see, I didn't pay attention to that. Was it winter as well?
Yep.
Okay. So I guess we got to get used to more winter, right? Stay warm, everybody, tomorrow, given what the forecast is. This for planning, we have a couple things we put on. One is just to let you know, Dan Melo cannot be here tonight. He had something else that required his attention, and understandably could not be here tonight. I'm not aware from him we have any home occupation permits for us to review with him for this meeting. So otherwise we would have gotten copies for you. So without objection, I'm just going to note we've already attended to that agenda item. We are keeping it on each one of our meetings, so it will show up again in 2 weeks. So if he does get any, he'll bring them to us and we'll review through them. He can talk with us and then he can go accordingly as far as what he does with his final review and decision making on that. So stay tuned. We may get some to be able to take this back up as far as what we want to do with home occupation regulations. We have commercial cannabis regulations. At our last meeting, the commission decided to follow the wise advice of Jeff Marcotte and take a look at killing leave regulations to facilitate what we would like to do. I know various documents have gone out in the past and recently as far as what different towns are doing. But if we wanted to look at killing leave, we can look at that. Delia will end up putting it on the screen and hitting the share button so people can see it online. And then what we'll do is probably the way to facilitate it will be is we'll just start from the beginning of it and we can just work our way through and see what we like, what we don't like. Doesn't mean we have to take everything that's in it, but we can also, if needed, see what other towns might want to do. One thing I have mentioned a few times, I'll mention again tonight, is I don't think we really have to spend a lot of time looking at definitions. We already have a good set of definitions. We can always see if they need updating. When we created the moratorium for these establishments, we did have a good list of definitions. So I think that's already saved us some time as far as having to spend a lot of time with definitions, and we can always take a look to see if we ever have to update any of them, and some of them can cover us for legal purposes or things that are out of state statute. We can, without objection, we can just go through and see what we think of some of this. And also if this, as we're going through this, if there's items that are not on here, or you think we should know about or should, look at some other set that we have, just let us know and we can certainly, pivot with that. One other thing I think that will help us is as we're starting to look through these, we can flag what we like and don't like. I know we've taken some prior notes before, but they were more just general as far as that we wanted to see about having this allowed in the community district as opposed to not in the community district, which would be really the industrial district per se. And we really didn't do too much delving into real detail. So if there are things that we would like to flag, wording, ideas, whatever, we can start flagging them, and then Delia, you can always then start assembling them into some wording as far as starting for us to see some drafts.
Yeah.
And then we'll flag where in the regulation, this would be zoning regulation, where in the zoning regulation we're going to need to start putting certain things in. We know about the definitions. There's certain things we're going to have to put in certain spots, and we can start flagging those. And that way then we'll be able to look at what our current regulations are and why certain parts have to go in. One thing we have talked about prior, and if we want to change our thinking on this, we could, is that we've been thinking that this type of permit would be a special permit. So if that's still our thinking, and many towns do it as a special permit, then we'll just need to note that this would be something we'll have to put in as allowed via special permit. Just follow that process. We can always, through regulation, add additional items in if we wanted, but it would then go under a framework of a special, permit. So I just wanted to note that for the record, so that way we would have that accordingly. And the other, before we delve into this, is just wanted to make certain we make, not that we're going to take a vote per se, but come up with some decision where in town will we want this to be. There was some discussion, the prior commissioner who had mentioned about whether or not have this just in the industrial district. We've had discussions about the community district. Remember, we also have the Lake District. So we have those districts. We have several others that aren't right now actually being used per se, but really the bulk would be looking at the community district. So I just opened up right now, just so before we start getting into too much of it, is that still our thinking? Figure if we have an idea about special permit. Next, we can have an idea of what district we would want these in or not in. Then that just better facilitates as we're looking through this, how that can fit into districts. So I just opened it up for discussion and commissioners online as far as following up on discussions about the community district. What districts are we thinking? Joe?
Yeah, first, a question. I think at one of these earlier meetings, we talked about most of the cannabis growing is done indoors. Is that still? Yeah, it's indoors. Okay. So the agricultural community district doesn't need to be an outdoor kind of agriculture. It can be indoors. So that would at least suggest to me that the industrial park is a reasonable space for having a cultivator, or micro cultivator.
And also there's the hybrid concept as well.
And the hybrid, I was going to get to that as a second question. We'll get into it.
Sure.
Can the town limit what is done? Can the town only have cultivators and prohibit dispensaries?
I think well, the town isn't outright through a town meeting and ordinance prohibiting it. So we then can decide what we want to do from a zoning point of view.
Okay.
And we can always ask, we can always get clarification if needed, as far as, I think whatever regulations we come up with, we're gonna want to have it undergo legal review anyway.
Sure.
So we can certainly be looking into those concepts and see what we might want. And then certainly get those questions answered. Unless we wanted to, we can certainly go accordingly. So I don't know if, I thought Rich Robbins was on, he is actually on, we can ask him, as far as what we're allowed to prohibit and not. I think that, if I'm remembering what the law says, I think it gives huge purview to just regulate it as zoning. Unless a municipality otherwise says we don't want any of it.
And part of that was a comment from Thompson, I think it's State Trooper Thompson, who was kind of opposed to the idea of a dispensary. Thompson, since there's no police department. And he anticipated some additional problems with the dispensary. We're feeling that we want to permit cannabis cultivating. That gets us at least part of the way and satisfies perhaps some demand to grow cannabis, but not allow it to be sold or dispensed in the town.
Well, Rich Roberts is on, we can ask him what we're allowed to do. Rich, can you hear us?
Yes.
What are we allowed to do as far as from the state law, from a zoning regulations point of view? Are we allowed to say we'll allow the micro cultivator, but prohibit the sale dispensing, or are we allowed to go that detailed with as far as the law?
Yeah, I believe so. You can prohibit it entirely either through ordinance or by zoning. So I would kind of extrapolate from that, since you could prohibit everything by zoning, you can prohibit all but one thing by zoning. The micro cultivators or the large scale cultivators. You could prohibit entirely recreational dispensaries and only allow hybrid ones. It's up to you. You could also, allow one in one zone and one in a different zone. I think you have a lot of flexibility. The one caveat would be that, under the general principles of zoning, you have to be uniform within the zone. So you can't do things like limit the number of dispensaries in a particular zone, because that would be violating the uniformity provision. Frankly, I don't see that as, a real concern, but those are some of the few types of restrictions on your overall zoning authority.
Thank you. I guess that answers the question as far as
Yep.
what we could do, which is
Interesting. It's
big
a
latitude.
flexibility.
Would it be possible to split it up from a concept that you were allowed to grow that in any one of the areas? section of the farm, a small farm. That was green to do, but you were only allowed to sell it. to commercial district. So, but we didn't have the situation where you've got, somebody's home in the middle of development over here that's selling it, and you've got unruly traffic, and we create all kinds of problems where the sale of it had to be in a commercial district. However, the growing of it could be, a little more widespread, because it's not gonna be that impact. Because people aren't gonna be, somebody's coming in with a truck and taking a load out or something to that effect, yes, but they're not going to be, you're not dealing with people that are going out with arms,
It sounds like we could do that if we wanted
Yeah.
to say
I
certain
think
things in the
that would be-
community district,
And also.
certain things in the
and-
industrial district.
Reading Thompson's, I think we should, we go more room of Woodstock Road, expand that 500 feet to at least 1,000 or maximize the 50. Any school district, any building associated.
And we can look at that as we start to go through the regs, on those, for example.
Unless that causes,
Sorry.
it shouldn't cause.
My thoughts on if we limit the industrial zone here is not real large in stuff.
Mhm.
And I don't know if what there are vacancies in there right now. If we were to say you can only be there, we maybe have somebody in mind, and this, we're only allowing this one, you know what I mean? It's just a little difficult to say it can only be there because somebody may not have access to that area, whereas, and I agree, we don't want it in, you don't want it in Stock Meadows, you want it in condos. So dispensers, so that we do need something with enough size area for a dispensary, I think. I don't know, well, like the one in Thompson, there isn't a whole lot of area, it's not like you've got acres. But there is that enough parking and, well, you think enough parking, who knows, they get going.
Dean?
Yeah, I think going along with what Mark said. The industrial district is so small and it's already an over traveled, poorly. Maintained road. Didn't need a lot of work. Add additional traffic into that one road that pretty much feeds the whole district. Probably not the best idea. We can push it out onto a main route. 97, 69, 171. Probably a lot better traffic wise. So we need to Peakford Road pretty much. Or something off of Peakford. Sid?
Yeah, I think Dean brings up a good point. Are we allowed to do that? Say it's all in the residential zone. Can we limit these establishments to a state highway?
I can ask Rich. Did you hear what Sid asked? Are we able to limit this, say, in the community district, but it has to be on the main road, so to speak, or a quote unquote state highway, state road?
Yeah, I think so, as long as there's a legitimate basis for making that regulation.
We could say public safety or something like that, public
Right.
welfare, because our charge is public safety, public health, public welfare, but that's
Yeah.
massively broad as far as what our authority is. So as long as we're grounding it, and say it's grounded in one of our statutory charges, we could conceivably do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd want to have something more to hang your hat on than just kind of waving the public health and safety and panic in the streets mantra that people have been chanting for 100 years.
Yes,
Yeah, I attended the last meeting, January 19th by Zoom, and the audio wasn't great, so I didn't quite catch this, but looking at the minutes. Up page 4, row numeral 6. And Jeff, this is something you said, you can just kind of clarify. The Jeff Board noted that the commission previously discussed that they would not allow the type of one aspect of commercial cannabis and restrict the other. both growing and retail will be fine.
I have to take a look at that. I don't have the copy with me. But I made it referring to what our prior discussion was, which we were having general discussions about at the time. You see where that is, number where?
Roman
Oh,
numeral
6.
I think the word on 51.
Yeah, it would be one aspect of commercial. Yeah, so what that's referring to is our previous discussion. We were not getting into this type of discussion where would we allow one and not the other. We were talking in general terms. My understanding is were we gonna just allow it all and how would we start in general concepts? But we didn't start getting into anything more detail like we're starting to get into now.
Alright.
I think that's what I was referring to, that we hadn't made that decision about allowing one aspect and not allowing another. We were just looking at it in general. If we're gonna allow it all, what are some of the general things we wanted to look at?
Yeah.
So, but we can, it sounds like, get into, and you had mentioned it, Joe. Allow one, not allow another, or where we would allow it to be, which.
And obviously that also could be amended later on, if we just chose to have a cultivator at this point. Then if there was interest in a dispensary, then that might. So be modification.
We could always, do that. That's it.
Is it state law that because of the town's population, we're limited to have one retail or outlet at the maximum of one? Or
The
does
state law did limit. But Rich, did they change that? I'm trying to remember what the initial law was, the initial thinking was that. Based upon certain population, the state was gonna allow. Certain
Yeah.
enough of licenses.
Originally, it was limited to one micro cultivator and one dispensary or one retail outlet per 25,000 people.
They changed, it, right?
Last year, that cap was removed.
So the answer would be, other than whatever the state decides to have to grant a license.
That's the limit then. Chicken and every box store and every one. But
Knowing that the state has to grant its licenses though,
Yeah.
so we can approve something, but the state has to make certain. Can't do anything without the state license.
so can we limit the number of grow facilities and retail outlets?
Rich, were you telling us that we can't limit the number of them? So if we say we allow this in the community district, we can't say we only want one? And if
No.
you're.
I-
Yeah,
In my opinion, no, because that would violate the uniformity requirement where you basically have to have everything within all the uses within the zone treated equally. And if you allow one, you have to allow anybody else that satisfies the special permit requirement. The kind of workaround that some places have adopted is basically a separation distance combined with limitations on which zones they're in that, basically gets you to the same place that if you allow one or two and then draw the radius, you're not going to have any more than that. To be honest, I think at this point, that's kind of overthinking it, particularly for a town like Woodstock. I don't, foresee 5 competing retail outlets coming in to populate the town at this point. If you get one and you decide you want to shut the door, I mean, you can amend the regulations, at that point to, basically cut it off or, limit the zones that they go in. But, as far as a numerical cap within the regulations, I don't think that's legal.
I think they're all setting up shop right over the border in Massachusetts, Southbridge, and those places. They're all popping up. Mark?
Possibly going back on the, not in the housing, just, real tight. If they put a stipulation as far as certain amount of road frontage,
We can do that.
that would help to make sense, so that it's not. Houses aren't in too tight to each other and stuff like that, so. That was one way to separate things out, rather than saying it has to be a state road. But obviously the traffic isn't, it won't be as noticeable it's on a state road. As some other roads.
Well, we could say we can put a lot of different size of it, all sorts of things within our authority. I would think, one thing, just thinking about districts, I would think that these types of places, just size wise, are not gonna fit in the lake. I would think that probably one district we're not necessarily including. I don't think they'll need. Can't imagine what those places are gonna want. They're gonna be any of the setbacks. Well, road frontage. I guess the issue to me would really be, what do we allow in the community district? What do we allow in the industrial? Yeah,
I was just gonna, say, but I think even in the residential district where it's pretty evident that we can set conditions like 1,000 feet from a church or a school. Might also allow 1,000 feet from a additional residential unit. That if somebody has a house and a lot of property, they can do some growing there. But if they can't, if it's a congested area, another residence within 1,000 feet or 500 feet, some distance might help ensure that it's not in a densely populated. So, either one, yes.
David, Dwight, Doug, I just want to make sure I don't miss you. If you have anything, just raise your hands. Or otherwise, let me know if there's anything. So as far as the community district, what would we be thinking about allowing the growing and the selling, or?
Yeah, I don't think if. Yeah, we have enough. Room anywhere else that we have, we can room in it. So I guess we could, but. I think there needs to be. It would be spread out throughout the town somehow.
Sid, then Tim?
If either Nikon or Dan or somebody could provide us with a map, that 500-foot buffer on what Killing is identified, schools, houses of worship, libraries, playgrounds, so forth and so on, both 500 and 1,000. I think would give us a pretty good visual as far as where in town these things could happen. And the amount of town that they could happen then. And that might determine whether we go with 500 or 1,000 or some other one.
Well, interesting with Killingly, and Celia's scrolling it up, they do say 500. If you look down the rest of that paragraph 1A, they talk about that the commission may in its sole discretion increase the separation distances up to 1,500.
I liked that it was a range.
Yeah, well,
depending
it
on
gives
where it
a,
was.
gives a discretion, you know, the commission may decide. So they clearly were thinking about what might happen if there's a situation he needed 750 or 1,000, whereas another one where 500 might work. I saw that. I'm like, that's interesting that they are giving themselves a range. You know, but we could ask about trying to control the map if you want. Well, we don't have that tonight, but we can ask Dan or whatever, or if you want to say. We can sort that out. However, we get a map, we can sort that out. So, did you have something more?
Yeah, I'm kind of going to prove out on this land, but looking at Killingley, say Woodstock puts a 500-foot radius on these types of land uses, school, house of worship, library, playground, so forth and so on. And that's established. And let's say now a daycare facility wants to open up shop within that 500 feet or that 1,000 feet or whatever we decide. Will they be denied their permit to open a daycare center because they're within the hot buffer or growth facility buffer or whatever you want to call
Delia?
That's what I've always had a question about, because, for instance, you could have it that distance, but if you wanted to have it so many feet away from our house, there could be a vacant property that zoning would allow a house. But now, does it mean that person can't build the house because that grow facility or that retail facility is within the 500 feet or the 1,000 or whatever?
Yeah.
I don't know how that would make any sense,
I'm trying to think of
because
it.
you would now taking the use away from their other lot.
Yeah.
But if it was the other way, where they could build the house, does that mean now the business has to close? I mean, if you granted an approval, how can you turn around and take it away because someone built a house in the next lot?
I don't see how you'd be able.
No, it'd be non-conforming.
You would think if, say, a daycare center wanted to open up within the 500-foot zone, they would be aware of that, they'd be making that decision on their own. Guess we could allow it, but it's kind of like buyer beware or business developer beware, you're in the zone of a real facility or retail outlet.
And we as a commission could certainly remind them, hey, you're looking to put this in and you're gonna be 200 feet away. This business has already been there, already granted an approval. You now want to go in, just be aware. You do it. You don't really have a recourse to come and complain then to us that this business is now, but you may not like it in a year that they're only 200 feet from. You've gone, it would be fair, completely unfair to the business after the fact. Joe, oh, I'm sorry, Tim.
If, would that be a good reason to have that, the maximum ability for the commission to put in the 1,500 feet? So if there's a house here and somebody wants to put this 500 feet away, but in between that land, the residential property, there is a vacant lot that's owned by this person. And now that makes that lot totally useless because they've got cannabis 500 feet away. They can't sell that. They're gonna say they want to sell it to their child or something. They put a house in. They can't do it. So at this point, the commission would step in and say, no, we're gonna make you be 1,000 feet away. Because it's the only way we can protect this person's property, or otherwise we devalue the property by doing this to them. So we would have the leeway to say, no, in this instance, you must be 1,000 feet away, still allowing for that landowner to develop that property.
Joe, did you have your hand up?
Just a quick comment. I thought I heard Rich Roberts say something about non-conformance when we were talking about the child care center moving closer. So I was wondering if that happens, does that make the business a non-conforming business? The business becomes the non-conforming issue?
Rich, was that what you were talking about? I'm sorry if we had cut you off.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, if at the time the cannabis establishment applies and gets the permit, there is no daycare center within 500 feet, they're allowed to, continue to operate, notwithstanding the fact that a daycare center may come in after that fact within 500 feet, because they're only really obligated to comply with the regulations and the circumstances as they exist at the time they were applying for the permit. One other thing, just kind of thrown out to make the mess even bigger. One thing some towns do is not have fixed separation distances because frankly, some of these are arbitrary, but just to identify the uses that they consider sensitive and require the applicant to show all of those that exist within, anywhere between 1,000, 1,500 or half a mile of the property, and allow the commission to evaluate the significance of that in the special permit process as far as, whether it's likely to have an adverse impact on a use that you want to protect. I mean, we have one situation where someone has, applied for a retail sales license, and it's on a 5-lane state highway with a daycare center about a quarter mile down off on another side street. It's within the separation distance, but the likelihood that, toddlers are going to be sitting in their strollers walking down, the equivalent of the Berlin Turnpike, past a dispensary or, on the opposite side of I-395 from the dispensary, makes it sort of irrelevant, how far it is away. And the commission could keep the flexibility to make the determination without necessarily picking an arbitrary distance that, may in some situation rule out, the ideal location, and force you into bad ones instead.
An interesting concept.
Very much like the. So I feel like if we just did a 1,500-foot setback, let's say, that puts you in the middle of over half mile circle. That you have to be away from everything. That's a quarter mile on each side of your property. That's a lot of space.
So we're able, Rich, then to say, here are establishments we would wanna have separate, so to speak, from cannabis establishments, but not put in a 500-foot radius or a 1,000-foot radius, and then we determine what would be the quote unquote appropriate separation distance.
Yeah, I think that would be permissible. I mean, it works. It works for, for liquor establishments, which is essentially where this all comes from. When the legislature was writing the zoning sections and the regulation sections of the cannabis legislation, they basically cut and pasted the statutes that were enacted right after prohibition ended, and sometimes it's pretty obvious that that's what they did.
Delia, you had something? Or then, and then,
With
Mark?
something that Joe brought up.
Okay.
And then just along, some reading in some of these other towns, with some of the issues, is the odor. Now, is there odor? Is this more of an issue at where it's being grown? Is this at a dispensary? Is it with the food and beverage manufacturer, with their baking goods with this? Where and how much odor issues is there? Have you heard from any other towns or anything?
Well, for example, Killenly just says the application must include the following, and it talks about odor controls used. I don't know the details, they don't specify the details of that, I don't know if there's particular state rules on that, I don't know.
Burning incense?
No, it's the growing.
Only if it's not, right?
Yeah, the application must include the following, so they say in Killingly, you have to include some, yeah, if necessary.
Yeah.
So they're gonna ask about that, I don't know what there is in regard to number one, state rules, but also if there's workers, what there might be for OSHA. So, which would have to be considered.
There's definitely very good filtration systems available. I don't know how much we could. Regulate that, but you go to a hydraulic shop at the town, way out Uxbridge. And there is the largest growing and processing place I have ever seen in my life. Right next door. Can't smell it.
And probably the state, correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, but with all this licensing and
It's like the size
certification
of
that
a
the state
Walmart
has to give, I imagine there must be a billion rules.
Yeah.
These places, especially if you're growing it, have to follow in order to maintain their license.
Yeah, I don't know what the state rules are, but I do know that one particular portion of the growing season is the most problematic for the odor, and it's not for the dispensary because pretty much all those things are contained.
But I guess if, like, for example, Killing says odor controls used if necessary, I guess one would have to figure out what's considered adequate or not adequate. Have to sort that type of stuff out. I don't know what other towns.
And that was
how
my
detailed
question,
they get.
as far as which, where we're talking, are we gonna allow the micro farm? Are we gonna allow dispensary? But it's which one of these, or is it all of them? That the odor maybe needs require.
Is there anybody else as far as what we might want to do with what districts? Are we thinking of both of these types of things or even hybrids in the community district? Joe?
I was not specific to that. I was just going to try and get a sense from Delia, if she's, I put Dan's not here, obviously. Of any interest expressed at the town hall from potential applicants? One time we had somebody joining us.
We had that one preliminary proposal a couple years ago, but that was before cannabis was actually allowed. That was more about a CBD oil, I think.
Oh, right.
That was the only thing I heard about. People with that.
And any commissioners here? People expressing interest?
There were two people who asked me about it.
Yeah, right. That
Jim was
was what I was
looking
thinking.
to
I didn't want to in the CBD until it's for the freaking licensing. Were you saying that
There were two people who asked me about it, and asking questions about the permitting process and things like that. We didn't have any regulation. But my last I heard from them was, it's trying to get the money to deal with the state licensing and everything else. That's not minor.
So no concerns from people saying, well, didn't have that.
We haven't been hearing from anybody.
I mean, I haven't heard anything.
No, we have not.
And
Well,
the-
We
online.
we did have, we did advertise about public hearings.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the moratorium, that we were gonna work on regulations, and we have not heard from anybody saying no. My last time I spoke with the Board of Selectmen, they had not received any requests for people to want to hold a town meeting and not have it. So we would then behoove ourselves to have, we have the moratorium. If we wanted to prohibit it, we could, according to what Rich says, but otherwise it behooves us to have regulation.
Then I might suggest that we look at proposing that we allow the both the micro cultivator or cultivator in either the industrial or commercial district, community district, but prohibit dispensaries. And start with that as kind of the general discussion and see if that raises any questions or concerns.
Can you state that again?
I would suggest that we proceed with permitting or considering how to permit the micro cultivator and cultivator, the industrial zone and the community district zone. But prohibit dispensaries.
And that would also include then hybrid. So,
Well, hybrid is, hybrid is not selling.
well, like.
No, they grow in, so.
They grow and sell.
I thought it was just they can grow this and medical. They can grow-
No, hybrid is selling,
Is Rick-
Yeah, Rich is on.
hybrid is selling medical and recreational.
there's a-
So you're saying, Joe, in the community industrial district, allow growing,
Right,
But not selling.
not allow selling, right? Just focus first on where we are with the growing, and if at some point we're getting requests or interests for selling, revisit the regulation.
exactly. I mean,
That's
this
your
will take a
idea.
little while to formalize and then have to have a public hearing on the zone. publication.
Any of the text amendments, they have to have a public hearing.
We'll see if that generates different kinds of interest.
Sid? Then D?
I'm just trying to clarify what we mean by selling. In the earlier discussion, I think we looked at, well, the 7-Eleven model where you drive there, you walk in the store, you buy something and you leave. The alternative is like a bar or a lounge where you would go, smoke, hang out for a while, watch a game, play some pool, and leave a few hours later. So are both those options still being considered, or can both happen in the same place? Retail and, lack of a better word, a bar.
I don't
You're
believe
referring
you
to
can
Joe.
use it on, there's no. My understanding was that any establishment where you're selling it, you could not be smoking it or eating it or whatever. That there wasn't any, it's not a hookah bar where you had all this other stuff. It's one of these dispensaries. Or a retailer is, something we're talking selling to the public. Because if we have if we have a grower, they have to be able to sell it, obviously.
Well,
But they sell it to a retailer, right?
But this would be selling it to the public as far as.
So we're talking no limiting or not allowing selling to the public.
So you're talking about cultivator.
Yeah.
So Joe, you're talking about a cultivator, person who can cultivate, grow and propagate. They can certainly then sell it to some company that,
Sure.
Does
Another
something-
retail operation.
there's also the product manufacturer, a person who obtains it, extracts it, manufactures a product with it, has a license, but then sells it to some other place, not to directly to the public. And then there's the, the dispensing itself, where somebody goes in and says, I want X amount of this type of cannabis. Right, so, but you're thinking then focus just on the cultivating, the growing. And not get into any of the dispensing or retail sale.
Yeah.
Okay. Sid and then Dean,
I'm sort of confusing.
that's what I'm trying to make certain.
So
clear.
So Sid, state law, I think your question. I believe that you can operate it like a bar if you want to, but we could also make a regulation to say you can only come and buy it and get it taken somewhere else. And use it at your house, so you can't consume it. So if we decide not to have a hot bar or lounge, we can regulate that, exclude that from regulations and say, sorry, you can't do that in town. You can grow it, you can have the 7-Eleven retail store where you go and buy it and leave and go home. Not the. That's my
The
understanding.
7-Eleven store wouldn't be in Woodstock.
That we can do that.
I mean, if you were saying something like a 7-Eleven walk-in, you buy something
But
I'm
Joe's
suggesting you don't
proposing
have-
not even having that.
in Woodstock. Yeah.
Not even in the industrial zone.
Correct. And mostly, I'm just using it as a conversation starter.
Yeah.
You know, we propose some regulation that says, okay, we're thinking ahead for recreational or medicinal cannabis, we're allowing growing, but we're just taking small steps right now. There won't be any retail sales. And start that as the initial regulation.
We could, and getting to Sid's point, there is a distinction between someone comes in and says, I want X amount of product A, and I'm just gonna go home and use it in my house, versus I'm gonna go there, I want X amount of product A, and I'm just like a bar, I'm just gonna consume it there, and use it there, and that's what it's set up for. There, those are two different business strategies. So, Joe?
And I would just say that's a great topic to make sure we have some definition. And I wasn't even thinking about people sitting around at a
They do.
bar or smoke shop and just enjoying the product.
Early on, we had some discussion with a gentleman that came in that was considering buying the Orange Art building.
Yes,
Yes.
right.
And that was his concept of kind of like the beer and the wine trail, go from
Right.
place to place and trying this one over here. That.
Well, the state doesn't yet have a cannabis grant.
Not official one.
Yeah, not an official one. So we're not gonna ask you on the record, Rich, to give us the unofficial trail map. We'll ask you later.
No, I mean, to the discussion about the consumption on premises, I don't think that the current licenses permit that.
That's a much different entity than, and I share your concern. I mean, it's going there and you're buying and you're consuming, and then the businesses would have to worry about what their liability is as, law enforcement, and basically the states have to figure out what is really considered under the influence when it comes to these products. Unlike how it's defined, under the influence of alcohol, for example, that's vexing for law enforcement. So, Dean, yeah, I know, Dean was up,
Yeah.
and then I see David, yeah.
So in general, I don't really like restricting what people can do. But I feel like, if we limit anything. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I do agree, in general, I don't like limiting what people can do, abiding, separate from the fact that we have federal law, which
Oh,
agrees with state law, but that's a different matter, but. If we're gonna go with.
I didn't know that.
You got it.
Yeah, I got it. So it's kind of like the Airbnb thing where we're behind the ball now. I'd rather not come up with regulation up front, then we're behind the curve again. I'd rather, if we're gonna do it and we're gonna allow growing and selling, we just do it now. Instead of when somebody asks for it and then we go, well, I don't know, we don't have regulations for it, you have to wait.
Well, in that case, we don't have regulations for it, they just can't do it, or they have to stop doing it.
Yeah, well. But I'd rather have it all.
We could do that. David, you had your hand up, and then I'll get to you, Tim.
Yeah, I just think sales are very similar to a liquor store where you go in and you pick what you want and then you leave and you take it with you. I don't, I don't believe that most of the sales allow consumption on site. But that's my perception. But I mean, I don't have a problem with having somebody having a sales room and selling. Especially, if they're like a micro producer and they're producing and want to produce and sell, that seems like that would be a good business plan if they wanted to do it. I don't know if we should, I think we should let them sell and just say no consumption on site.
Tim?
I guess my only concern with eliminating one and not the other. Fact that, not knowing much about this in the size of the operation, do we limit? If you're only gonna do retail, you've got to be a large operation to determine of selling it retail, wholesale wise, in order to be able to be profitable. Whereas then that totally eliminates the little, small operation that would say that the only way I'm gonna survive is to grow a small amount and to be able to sell it retail myself. Because if I have to sell a wholesale, I'll lose my shirt. It doesn't, so it doesn't allow for success, so. We wanna make regulations to protect ourselves, but we also want to be fair to everybody, if somebody wants to do this. Do we wanna leave that opportunity available to somebody that wanted to do this in a small way, not necessarily put in something the size of a Walmart supercenter, because that's the only way you're gonna do this from a retail standpoint.
And we already limit.
You look at,
the size.
the orchard, what I do at my own farm, trying to get into the retail business a little bit, is how, we're diversified. We make it go, and that eliminates that, and that doesn't make that possible. It's something to have that out. So,
I believe that's state law, though, the state, because there are no definitions of, I don't believe that you are growing yourself and retailing. I don't think that there was, I thought that was the whole thing. You can grow it, but not do both.
Well, it all gets to what the state allows.
Right, and I don't think, because there's, in all of these definitions you read, there is nothing about growing and selling.
And I'd have to see what our definitions, since we did create definitions. When we did the moratorium. But getting to your point, as far as size, we already limit. How big a commercial entity can be. We already have those regulations. So, and I know typically said you can't be what, cultivator. Person, it gets into their definition, but if a business wants to come in the size of, say, a Walmart, and they're exceeding. What our regulations say, commercial can't exceed, they can't exceed it. So we already have that in our regs. Those were put in some years ago, many years ago.
can we get clarification for the state regulation as to whether you're either a grower or a seller?
We
Yeah,
can, I don't know what our definitions say here. We have cultivator, delivery, dispensary. Yeah, these are general definitions, which actually, some of them are very similar to what Killing has. They're probably all cut and pasted from several different locations. We can get the clarification certainly, as far as exactly what it says in the state law.
Since maybe a regulation that's already can't do that anymore.
I could have interpreted it. I thought you just needed two different licenses. I thought you could still do the same property with two licenses.
Well, Rich, what is allowed per state law as far as the difference between growing and dispensing? Do you have to own, you can only do one, or Are you able to get a license from the state to do both? If the
No, I
state
think-
so granted?
Yeah, they're separate licenses and you would have to get both of them. And if, if you wanted to have, there's no farm to table license, so to speak. You get your cultivator or your micro cultivator license, you get your retail license. The same person, same entity could probably get both. It may actually be prohibitively expensive at this point to do that, but that's how it would happen.
That answers the question. That,
Like that, and what we're kind of talking about over here, isn't that the trend in agriculture? Small scale, locally grown, locally marketed, and an outlet in your farm. Why is pot, I mean, kind of devil's advocate, why should pot be any different?
Right.
Whether I go to Tim's place, buy a quart of yogurt, go to the orchard, buy a barrel of, or a basket of apples, I go home and I consume it. Why can't you do that with cannabis? And should we be modeling this in line with current agricultural, not just rules and regs, but trying to get land and farmland to be used in pot or milk or?
Well, I think they do that because of the moonshining rules. So you can't make liquor and sell it. So I think it's an outgrowth of the liquor regulations. Because it's considered a controlled substance.
This is such a gray area right now. 'cause my
well, the
federal-
controlled substance technically is illegal for federal law. So I can tell you, like in the medical field, that's a big issue. Because I have to follow federal law. I can have,
Right.
I have nothing to do with cannabis, marijuana. Technically, I could lose my license as a drug enforcement agent. So the feds haven't caught up with what a lot of states are doing. At some point, the feds are gonna catch up basically and decide what they want to do with it. But, I could see how they get into sort of moonshine type of. But
Right.
there is, you are allowed as a person to grow a certain amount, I think, and, but you're not able just to sit there and you'll say, hey, I'm growing it now, I'm gonna start to sell it, without going through this whole licensing process. The state does.
I'd like to ask Rich if the Connecticut General Statute 420F was purposely made 420, or was that just how it ended up?
Yeah, 420F is the medical marijuana, 420H is the recreational, and the statute reference is Title 21, Section 420. And I commented on that at some presentation that I was giving, and one of the people that I talked to later said that they worked at the legislative commissioner's office, and it was one of the few fun things they were able to do was, pick 420 as the numbers for those statutes.
It's supposed to be like.
You know what I mean? It's 420 is the police. Code that when police say they're like a 1020 or 420 is marijuana. Police radio.
All right. And so people say that,
That's
I did not know that.
but who says people don't have fun in Hartford coming up with this stuff? So, so it's that, so just to see where we can distill some things in. Are we looking then to say, for the community district, industrial district, we can allow you to be a micro cultivator or cultivator, but also allow you to be a retail or dispensary? Is that where we're looking to as far as what districts? Again, the Lake District, I don't see how most of those properties. You're not gonna fit probably, you can't really fit much of anything, but really, we're looking at community districts, which is a huge portion of the town. Is that what we're looking at then, is both in the community district and the industrial? And I agree, the industrial district, I don't even know if there's any open space in it now, but it's very limited anyway. As far as what to live.
At 500 or 1,000 feet from another residential
You can
unit.
have the houses by the entrance.
I do have a question. The boundary of the Lake District, does that include like Teuton's property or the old Okohos?
If that is in the Lake Tax District, that's the boundary of the Lake District. So the three Lake Tax Districts, what their legal boundary
Yeah.
is, that's the boundary of the Lake District.
I can find the zoning map if you want to look at it.
But that is exactly how it was phrased. So when we crafted that, we just said, you already have your boundary. We're just gonna adhere to it.
I was just thinking of two really large pieces of land that were close to there. I wasn't sure if they were in.
So anything that's in the tax district is considered a lake zone. Then we don't have that. Where are we then wanting to do, allow, just as a concept, allow both in the community and industrial district? Just so we can have some. sense
So
of
I'm still
moving
in
forward.
favor of just doing the one step, but, no, but it's going along. Oh,
Okay, that just gives us at least some, it doesn't mean we're wedded to it or we're locked into it, just gives us an idea of kind of where are we, moving with it. I know we have been talking about some of the regulations. You want to go, Delia, to the requirements. We were already talking about it, we've been going through Killingly, talking about what we want to do about separation. And it sounds like you seem to like the idea of trying to have that flexibility that Rich Roberts mentioned. Did you have something, Tim?
Yeah, how, is there a way we could craft within it that it had to be within a certain distance of a public road, town road, or a state road, which would eliminate the possibility of having this on some back street of, the Lake District or something like that, because they're not public roads. So that it would, I just get concerned about something out in the middle of, stabbing it in someplace. Just creating a nightmare, whereas if it's on a public road or, a town, whether it be a town road or a state road. But it would eliminate, these things cropping up in a Lake District or something.
So you're talking about, well, if we don't allow it in a lake district, it can't be in a lake. The Lake District is a separate district. We were to say we only allow it in the community district, industrial district,
Okay, so,
and say we don't allow it in the Lake District.
all right,
Don't allow the
we
lake.
could specify a way of being able to specify.
Because we're gonna have to, for each of those districts, we're gonna have to say, do we allow it or not? Now, when we created the lake districts, the lake association, their leadership, I went to their meetings to talk with them. They wanted all the allowed uses in the community district. They wanted it all in the lake. So it was created that way. That what was allowed in one, we were gonna mirror that and say, okay, here's the new lake district, and here are the allowed uses, and here are the prohibited uses. But we can do that. We can say, no, this is only allowed. We'll go into and say, in the community district, this is where it's allowed. In the industrial district, this is where it's allowed. You don't have to say it's allowed in the lake district. We can say it's prohibited there. And then that gets around, I'll be worried about that. We can do that, and that's why us thinking about what districts that will point us to where in the regulation we have to start putting wording. Because there's going to be multiple parts of the regulation we're going to have to flag. Delia?
Right, so I can show the regs if everybody wants to see them online, but in the regulations, each zone is broken down by permitted uses and special permit uses.
And prohibited,
So-
right?
Right, so if you wanted to allow them in one zone, you'd only put that text in that zone. If you wanted to allow them in both, like the iPark from the community district, you would add that text just to those sections. If you didn't want to have it in the Lake District, you wouldn't add that text. And you could prohibit it in that zone specifically if you wanted to, but also the use is not allowed, it's actually prohibited anyway.
And that again, that gets to, we would be flagging all these different parts of the zoning regs where we're gonna have to put wording. So. But as far as, do we like the idea of wanting to see about wording, about having that flexibility for the commission determining separation distance? And not saying it'd be 500 feet or give a range of 500 to 1500. We just ask Dave, Dwight, Doug, let us know if there's anything you wanted to chime in about relative to, to that. But we can certainly look at it. don't have to do it tonight, but we can look to see what type of wording. We could find, or feel you might be able to find, or if Rich, there's any wording. That you know that is workable for us, that you might suggest, by all means, let us know. But if we wanted to go that, we look into that. Okay, and then as far as Killingly has, and all places have things they want to separate it from, I think Rich Roberts used the term sensitive places. If we look at Killingly, they have what? Schools, houses of worship, libraries, public playgrounds, town parks, recreation facilities, daycare centers, nurseries, town buildings, Board of Education facilities open to the public. I don't know what we think about all of that, or if there's anything additional, or. I mean, that's a pretty comprehensive list, and looking at some of the other towns, they seem to have all very similar lists. If we wanted to flag that, you know, you already did, way ahead of us. You want to get into what color you're using to flag it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to say what the creation.
We're trying to figure out what the
If anybody online who wishes to speak, just raise your hand, please. Don't unmute yourself. Otherwise, we're gonna start getting background stuff. So I'm trying to scroll through as best as I can to catch people, but we'll recognize you at an appropriate time. Just remember, this is not a public hearing. This is more for the commission to be sorting through ideas, so there's no other than we're just showing another town's status. Scrolling through, okay. But what were you saying?
I'm just trying to figure out.
Oh, okay. But was there anything else we wanted to consider adding to the list of quote unquote sensitive places? Okay. And if we find anything, we can always add that in. And then we have this here, Delia, I know if we, is there anything else in that first paragraph that caught our eye? I think they have a duplicate sentence. All right. As far as the next paragraph, which is B, that actually apply to us here. The residential district.
Can I go back to the first one?
Sure, yeah.
Historic buildings and or maybe like range buildings. As part of us, I don't know if things would fall into it or.
Historic buildings
Historic building,
defined
I'm
by
thinking
what?
that,
Defined by the state, or how would we define that?
Yeah, well, like Pink House comes to mind. I know it's surrounded by other things, but there are probably other historic houses.
You want to say that, Delia?
We have a historic properties map. If you wanted to, you could say that the sensitive uses could include housing or structures that are identified on the historic properties map.
About elderly housing.
They need that.
They need that. It'd be the poster on that.
Well, we can put that in as far as what's on the historic properties map, if we wanted to get into historic properties, for that. And that's a designated map.
Right.
So that would be readily easy to access and say it's on there or not.
You talking about the
Public or like a private?
Well, I think that you hit the right solution. The map that's already identified by the town's historic. Properties.
Then the rules of the historical district are already protected from that.
No, the historic district
That's on zoning.
is in zoning. They have nothing to do with zoning. We're the ones that do this with zoning. They can get into things within their purview. They can get into things that are outside, like the colors of things and art.
Interior.
Yes, but as far as whether or not to allow it, they may have a different reason to say it may not need a certificate of appropriateness or whatever, but they'd have to really ground themselves carefully in what they're allowed in statute. For us, though, we're the zoning. So if we were to say, yes, we would allow it there because it's the community district. If it otherwise meets what would be allowed for what they do, then, our zoning still applies. Our zoning overarches. So, their they're not a separate zoning district. They're just, and their district emanates from a separate state statute, but they're not a zoning. They fall within the community district.
No, on historic, just on what Joe's saying, but if it's a historic building, not necessarily in a historic district, it could be, I can't think of any offhand, go ahead. Well, the Red Wine Schoolhouse would be one, but if somebody's got an old farmhouse that used to be a tavern, so their house is 200 years old, it's a historic house. Does that mean you can't
If it's not on
put
the
a
historic,
dispensary near there?
Delia has had a good idea.
So it's not saying that you're prohibiting them from going into those structures, you're identifying that as a possible sensitive property, and then it's my understanding, you're asking the applicant to identify where these sensitive properties are and how far away they are from the structure or the proposed use.
Right, but
Not that they
it
have to
may be
identify
somebody
everything
just,
in
their
the
personal
town,
house is a historic thing.
They could.
And they wanna put it, and so they may wanna put it in on their property, but if we say it's gonna be 1,000 feet from. And it's only a personal house, but if it's a historic,
But I don't think it was, I didn't hear anyone saying they wanted to have a set distance from the sensitive uses. I thought they said they wanted the applicant to identify which sensitive uses are within so many feet of their proposal.
okay, so it's not a,
prohibition or a standard that you have to be so far away from them to identify them.
well, that's on this list right there, that's what it is.
But we're not gonna go.
Shall
by
not be within so many feet radius.
But we're not gonna go with that. We were talking about going with the idea that Rich Roberts raised, which is giving us the flexibility to determine. Without putting an actual number to the regs. So we could say, you know, and Delia's idea was what's identified on the historic properties map. And we could determine, well, if there's something that's 1,000 feet away, and it's on the historic properties map, and it's 1,000 feet away, that's fine. We may say if it's 500 feet away, it's fine. It depends on how we would then determine it. But we'd have to have some type of criteria for what's historic, and if we use the historic properties map, you're either on it or you're not on it. That would be a criteria, because we'd have to determine, we'd have to have some criteria. Good.
Just thinking the same thing. So are we thinking of using the same 9 criteria that apply to special permits, or would we develop a subset or additional criteria for the cannabis?
Well, we could, I mean, look what we've done with, we've done that with, say, lighting. For non-ag, non-residential, we have zoning and special permit criteria. But we do have additional things we've required for that, but we did student housing. We put an additional criteria, so the special permit that we have. And we streamlined it some years ago when we did the big overhaul of zoning regulations, I forget when that was, but. Yeah. We took a look and we said, all right, here are the things in a special permit you absolutely have to give to us. Now, some of them are required by the state. But here's a bunch of things that you may give to us if we determine it's needed. So all that would still be applicable to the special permit process. And if we then wanted to add additional things in, we can do that. So we can create, you know, the cannabis, wherever we're gonna put that in, and say it's gonna go by special permit, fine, all that special permit stuff applies. And then we can put additional things in if we wanted to, as far as you must give us a, you know, like a killing has a noise abatement if it's necessary, or odor control, or whatever, traffic, we can put those additional things in. And when we craft that, you know, and we're thinking about what we might want and not want, those are things we want to keep in mind. While still keeping the special permit, because one thing about the special permit is, and all of our permitting processes, basically, if we feel there's anything additional that we want to obtain, as long as it's grounded in our statutory authority, we can ask. And that's one of the flexibilities of a special permit. Delia?
So I'm just gonna add that what he's talking about is creating the standards. Just like, for instance, you have a non-residential use, you have a section in your zoning regulations that have standards that apply to those uses. So you would have your definitions about this, you put them in the definitions section. We would go to the permitted, I mean, the zone where it identifies the zone, whichever one you decide you want to put it in. And we would put it under special permitted use. And then you go to the standard section, you have to create a new section that identifies what the standards are that apply to this particular use. So we have a section on non-residential use, and it has a standard on maximum size of your building, that sort of thing. You can create a new section that would be for cannabis, and you can have standards for cultivators, standards for retail, standards for wholesale, or hybrid, or whatever.
And also in addition, when we talk about the application requirements, separate from the standards, but an application requirement, we have that built into special permits, but if we wanted certain things that we are going to require for these types of applications, separate from other types of special permits, we can put that in as well. Saying for this type of special permit or whatever, we're wanting X, Y, and Z. We do require a lot of stuff that I think is, we talked about for years, that is good for special permits, and it's good to streamline that. But we do have a lot of flexibility what to ask for, and you can fill that into regs on these types of applications, if we so wanted. Did I get to everybody? I think I got to all of you, right? Okay. Is there anything else in this first paragraph then that we were thinking of as far as? We'll put in about the historic properties map. Okay, well, I think for right now, we are gonna use the special permit criteria as our base. But then to me, and I'm open to what people think, as we're starting to craft regulation, what additional might we want to require? Build that into the cannabis regulation. In addition to the whatever's already general special permit. Mark?
It was on something that I was reading, but it was on another topic instead of the cannabis. It was on
Okay,
Airbnbs.
but yes, Joe?
Still on that first paragraph, you need to give the applicant a radius that they have to identify all these sensitive areas. And we're not saying anything.
That would make sense.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
What radius would we want to use?
Yeah, oh.
100 miles?
Well, if we're gonna go up to 1,500 feet as a potential.
What do
well,
we require now? Special permit, do we require something?
Not that sort of thing. We just require another property within,
Yes,
but it doesn't,
another property. If
you
there's
don't have
certain
any
things.
setbacks, churches or whatever.
Well, we can certainly, we can see what we might like.
Why wouldn't we go with the max? And you can make a. Yeah, this is in light of making a determination. So let's have all the facts.
You're talking, say, 1,500 feet
Right.
from anywhere on the boundary.
If
Well,
there
wherever
was something
or
else
from
in
the
there, you would like to look at it 1,400 feet.
We can ask for that, and certainly they'll have to give us.
That doesn't mean that we won't allow it. It just.
Right.
You
Tells us
tell
what
the
they're
reg,
in.
we know what to look at.
You want that from the boundary of the property, or do you want it from the front door of the building?
Which would make sense, Delia, from the boundary or from the
The
building itself?
I would say the building itself.
Because if you've got 1,000
Yeah,
acre
you got a
property.
big piece of property.
Some of that, I don't know, in your house.
It's all the way down, yeah. Wait, good for, no.
They own 1,500 feet in all directions, so I think that.
So we're doing it from the building, which is fine, so we know where we're doing it from, and it would be an application requirement. That we say, identify these things within that radius, so to speak. It's not a setback. And then we still would have the flexibility to say, well, yeah, there's a couple of these things, but they're like 14, 50 feet away. That's more than enough, we're fine. You know, whereas if they identify a boatload of these things 100 feet away, that's a different story as far as how we view it. And this would then be an application requirement. They would have to show us, you know, where that is, and then we determine.
But it would be from, just saying the building in general.
Yep.
Take from the front door, because then you put the door on this side, but I would put one building.
Well, you were the builder,
Yeah,
right?
we'd move the
But
door.
that's different. So this just gives us an idea of how we're gonna define something. Delia?
When you ask them to identify anything that's on this list that we consider sensitive within the 1,500 feet of the edge of the structure, you could ask them to show how they're minimizing the impact on the needs repair. So they might show that they don't believe their traffic would have an impact on the historic health or whatever. So, like, we have a criteria, they have to draft a statement about how they're in compliance with the P O C D and all the other things in there, in the criteria. You should have a criteria where they have to show, make their case as to what their impact would be on those sensitive uses.
Well, in the special permit decision-making, we have that list we have to go through. We have to, not a test, but we have to say, yes, they meet all these things. So that does cover a lot. In there, we can always add something additional that, under cannabis that they have to make certain about what we feel is the impact on these quote unquote sensitive places. But we still would have to follow, to still go through that checklist, which we're required to note on record. That's why we read it on the record. So we can add additional, not into the special permit part of the regs, but what we want in the cannabis part of the regs to add to that. We'll make a note then of that application requirement about identifying things. And that way then we can, as we're going to be drafting wording, we'll have that put in. So, was there anything else on that first paragraph as we're starting to scroll through? And I don't think we may not get through this entirety thing tonight. Anyway, so we're going to continue to keep this on our agenda. And I don't know yet how busy we're going to be next. In 2 weeks, I'll have to find out from Dan what is brewing for applications, but we're not going to be loaded with lots of permit applications. I'm trying to keep these things on a rolling basis on our agendas each time. Is there something else you have, sir?
Not so much, but just on the priorities, hopefully we can get to the Airbnb and home businesses to start looking at that regulations, because that seems to have some more imperative.
Well, we do have both, and we're also have to be mindful of how late we want to be here tonight.
Right.
Normally, we try to keep these meetings within a certain time frame.
I understand.
But one thing we can do is, and I was gonna get to this as well, is from a process point of view, as we're trying to start to draft wording. It does take a little bit of time to make certain we draft it. You'll be doing some drafting, and then we want to make certain we can get it out in enough time, like with the meeting packet. So for example, I think to be able to start drafting some of this stuff up and identifying where in the regs, all these different things we're gonna have to deal with. I know certain realistically, you're gonna be able to get that done in time for the meeting packets go out next week. So one of the things that I would propose, and this follows what you were saying, Joe, is we're going through some of this. This will give Delia the opportunity to start doing some things for us. For our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks, provided we will have time to take up, let's say, Airbnb, knowing that our priority would have to be in 2 weeks, any applications we get in for various things that would require us to act upon. We could put we may not get to it fully tonight. We could put Airbnb on and not put cannabis on. And we could be alternating to make certain that, as opposed to we focus just a little bit on one, then pivot to the, to it at the same meeting, or trying to do it all at the monthly meeting, because some monthly meetings, we just don't have the time, depending on how crunched we get with applications or a public hearing. We could do that if that would make sense. So that our meeting in 2 weeks, I don't have to put cannabis down. I already have the agenda somewhat drafted, so we have placeholders. We can put Airbnb on and then give time to go through this at the meeting after that. If that would make sense?
Yeah. We have a public hearing on the cannabis? Or not?
What do you mean?
Didn't we?
Yes, we have a public hearing coming up on the extending the moratorium.
Correct.
Yes, because that's a text amendment. We do have that, but that's not to discuss this.
No, but just as we're on the agenda, what was the date of the public hearing?
That's in 2 weeks, right? that the one? Is that what it is? Is it? Oh, yes,
Because
because
we didn't have enough time.
because of February, yeah, we didn't have enough time, you're
All
right.
right.
So it
That
is-
was all,
I
just
think
when you were talking about, well, we won't talk cannabis at the next one, but if we had a public hearing on it,
Yeah, but that public
Right.
hearing, so
it's just for
the public to talk about this type of stuff would be unallowed. Because you could only talk about the moratorium. You can't talk about anything else about cannabis. You'd have to be ruled out of order. So that's right, because of where we were with February and stuff, we had to put it on for our first meeting in March.
That was all, just when we're trying to figure how much time we would have to work on Airbnbs if we had the other.
Yeah, but that public hearing may not be too long. They haven't been long yet, because we're just talking about the moratorium.
Yep.
Yeah, setting the date. It's very, very different. Very, very focused. So if this were to make sense to people from a process point of view, we won't put cannabis on in 2 weeks. I'll take it off the draft I have. I already have Airbnb on anyway, and we would keep that on. And then we can see what to do, and we can always play with, as we're setting the agendas, what we're gonna take up to make certain we can tackle it. So, we've done that some years in the past when we were taking up multiple items, trying to make certain we can focus and have enough time to sort through something at a meeting. So I'll make a note of that, then I'll let Dan know as well. So he's aware that that's what we're gonna, be doing, in that regard. Was there anything else in that first paragraph? And I'm just checking to see about, our other commissioners. Stop.
Off the duplication, right?
What?
The duplication you caught already?
I think they did duplicate 2 sentences, but we don't need that anyway, because, we're not gonna talk about putting in 500 feet or 1,500 feet. So, and let me just ask Rich, are you still there?
Yes,
When you mentioned about that flexibility of having the separation distance, is that something that is actual wording that some towns use? That we could look at just to see how they crafted their wording?
yeah, actually, I forwarded one sample to you and Delia by email a little while ago.
Okay. We'll take a look. So if there's actual some wording, then we could see what that wording is when Delia, as you're drafting some stuff.
And I know of a couple of others that I could talk to you about offline.
Okay. Yeah, because that would help us then if there's already some wording we can look at. So, thank you.
Sure.
Is there anything else in that first paragraph that we didn't cover? Okay. The next one is, if you want to scroll here, so we can just see the next one as we're just going through the Gillenly ones. So that's B. This is talking about what? A proposed use of plots of a residential district. They're gonna require a buffer strip, a landscaping thing. What do you think, Gary, as far as applicable to a separate from landscaping we might otherwise want?
I think a buffer would be a good idea, if this is gonna be a use that may have a new building, but either way, if it's a new building or an existing building. You might have quite a bit of traffic. I know you have light rules, but the light has light on the building. And so even if there's low level of noise, traffic tends to have noise, so. Might have a buffer the neighboring property from. Yeah,
Would that be something that's put into the ABCD there, that 25 foot buffer zone? It's just this discretionary thing. If we're gonna have adjustable limits, it could be 1,000 feet away, it could be 500 feet away, depending on discretion of the. Would that be a discretionary thing as well? That here we're gonna allow you at this 500 foot mark, but there is a residential. And they have children and they have, we think that there should be some sort of a buffer. Between there and say that on stipulation for the permit, you're gonna have to fence it. Or, have some sort of a buffer zone.
You're referring to when they start getting the.
Yeah,
paragraph
so the
two,
application.
An application requires
Must
it.
include the following, and.
When they say the application, we have to put in it, they're putting the buffer in.
If necessary, see, so it says order control, use if necessary. It's, noise abatement, if necessary, buffer zone, if necessary. You know, if you're 1,200 feet away, do you really need a fence? If you're 500 feet away, maybe.
But is that more up in B where it is? Because the odor control and the noise abatement, if necessary, but if it's just if it's a inside growing establishment. And they don't have tractors running, you don't have. That's why you get
Again,
necessary.
we're in a discretionary thing, that's,
So basically what you're saying, Tim, and then I recognize you, Delia, where we're talking about what must be in the application, like an application requirement. Be proposing what is your buffer. If it's necessary. Now, we can determine if that's necessary. So, you know, we could say, yes, we feel you need it, for reasons why, or no, it would seem to have no bearing at all. But at least if it's necessary, have that as an application requirement. Delia?
There's standards and then there's application requirements, so we have to divide up what you're creating, and the standards go in one section, and then the application requirements go in a different section. So you have to figure out what standards you want them to comply with. And if you're gonna have some that only apply if it's required, I'll have to talk to Rick Roberts, see how we can draft that to make it appropriate.
Then we can look into that.
I mean, for example, Rusty Relic, ran a permit up there, but they had to close the road down on 69. You know, so can we make it so that, yes,
Include the
you're
draft.
fairly close, but we're gonna require that you're gonna put a fence up, whereas you're not required to put a fence up every time. Require a buffer zone every time, because it may be 1,500 feet different, so there may be a 1,000-foot difference, so there may be, as he said, a Wilbercross highway going between, and there is no need for buffer zone, you've got one there. But if we deem necessary to put one, we would have to.
And I agree with what Delia said, we'd have to create a standard. You know, if we wanted to invoke it. But then have something in the application requirements that says, if it's necessary, you gotta put it into the application requirement, or we may then say during a public hearing. We think this does require a buffer and look at our standards. You know, in that regard. If you go accordingly, so it would have to be two different spots, as Delia mentioned. Yes, Joe?
Just thinking some of these words like if necessary. Creates a challenge for the applicant. What makes it necessary,
That is correct.
right, you know, so.
Although in our special permit. I think some of that does fall.
Standards.
We don't.
Yeah, right.
We haven't seen it is like. So we get going.
We can just write the name. No,
Yeah.
write with me.
Right before that barn, it's like heading up the hill toward Nichols, that's a grove.
Yeah.
197.
Yeah. Actually, that barn, they put up like a 7-foot tall, like wooden stockade fence
Outside.
on the right side of it towards the college. That's a.
Well, we can see, we can then see how we want to handle that. I mean, I do agree that, you know,
Right, good.
we do have special permit criteria that have to be followed.
Right.
And then there's a lot that says, if necessary, if needed, or if determined. I think some of that would have to be hashed out. Ideally, through a preliminary discussion, we can have a discussion, but not everybody chooses to follow that out. And hopefully they would actually talk with a zoning enforcement officer or Delia before submitting an application. It's something of that's going to require a special permit, but not everybody does. But we would have to see where that is. But I agree, we would have to be giving some guidance to applicants. Steve?
So could we come up with a pretty narrow scope of when you would have to have a fence or some sort of sound abatement? Say within, you know, like 200, 250 feet, you gotta have a fence, and then we can leave it to our discretion for anything past that.
I was thinking of drafting it so that if your structure is within so many feet of the
Yeah.
boundary line, then you provide the buffer and provide maybe some other stuff like.
Yeah, but that would still leave it up to us to, if we want to extend it past that. Or would it be if it? Is
I
it
could
past
do
that,
that.
then it is. what it is.
See how it gets written.
Well, why wouldn't that be at our discretion? Because, right, we can in a special permit. We have leeway using common sense to say what we might want or not want. So if we say, hey, in these situations, we want you to be showing us your buffer. But if you're beyond that, we're discussing it with the applicant in a public hearing, we may decide, you know, yes, we think given what you're doing and what's around it for whatever reason, we want you to do a landscape
Yeah,
buffer and show us that plan then.
I feel that's
And we
kind of
can
the
do
whole
that.
point of the public hearing is.
Yeah. And we can require that now in public hearings. We have leeway of anything additional, so in a sense, that's within our statutory authority that we feel is needed, we can state that and look into it. But it doesn't have to be required up front. I think that wouldn't lose any of that flexibility. I would hate to lose that.
Yeah,
flexibility.
that's why I was trying to narrow it to a standard that was very small. And then we can expand upon that as we see fit.
We could do that unless there's any objection from people. But again, we can see what the wording might look like. I think it would be very similar wording, you know, to what we already allow. We've used very similar wording all for other words. For things that we determine we need or want to look at or whatever. Okay. We can certainly, and you'll draft up something, Delia, people, for something you're gonna draft up.
Right.
With regards to what we're talking about, number 2. Remember, we already require various things for special permits and applications. So what, you know, we can look at these things as far as these would be things that would be additional things pertinent to cannabis establishments beyond what we already require in a general sense for special permits. As far as what people might think we might want, you know, with stuff, or did we want to, I mean, Killingly has things that they say they do require and some that they say if necessary. Like, for example, security methods implemented, that's not an if necessary, that's must be provided. So,
Yeah, I believe there's even a state statute for what has to be around it. Do we have to include that in our regulation, referring to the state statute, or?
well, Killingly does say, for example, here, meeting the minimum requirements of DCP. So they do say that a cannabis establishment shall have an adequate security system, blah, 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 that meets those minimum requirements. So, I mean, we can certainly, as appropriate, we can say, yes, it has to be, of course, what the state requires, because the state requires it anyway. But we do have things in our regulations where we refer to state statute or as amended. So. But it would seem to me whatever are the things that must be provided, including, for example, whatever, if you've gotten your state permits and you've gotten your state license, I mean, those are obvious things before you can do anything, but you would think that we would want to make certain we know that, or the town gets briefed with that. But this can be something then as far as, you know, what additional things specific to cannabis we want. But in our special permits, we do require a bunch of things. Some of them are if. But nevertheless, this would be stuff to add on to what's needed. I just don't want to make certain. The other. But again, that could be food for thought as far as we don't have to come up with that list tonight. One thing we can ask is, Delia, if you think there are things looking at killing rates or things that you're aware of, that you might want to suggest to us as you're drafting some wording, what might be things specific to cannabis establishments we might want to put in, separate from whatever we require in special permits already, which we have a lot of different things in here. Of what you think would be things that we would want them to show us. That could be helpful for us then. Okay. We can do that. David, Doug, Dwight, did you have anything? I just want to make certain I don't miss you.
I do not, Jeff.
Okay. Is Doug still on? Are you still on, Doug? I don't see you. Okay,
So under the special permits, we can still go with the parking requirements.
all of those special permit criteria are still all gonna be valid.
Okay.
What we would have to decide is what additional do we want to put in specifically here. So all those things you see, Joe Bullock, for special permit application requirements, special, that type of stuff, all that would still apply.
Okay.
We would then add to what we think.
Right.
So. I don't know, I don't see Doug on, so he may have stepped off while we. So. You'll note that when we take our vote to adjourn, who's on. Yes,
I was thinking of drafting the standards so that it has to address the concerns of noise, lighting, traffic, security, and open. Are there any other concerns you want to address? What? Specifically about the water.
wastewater,
Yeah, wastewater, I mean, if you're fertilizing.
In the regular special permit, but yeah, see if anything needs to be added.
if it's not an automatic requirement, special permit, you can make it for cannabis. Requirement.
Their regulations have waste management, which I was assuming was something. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this works. Is there, what do they use for soil? Is this the hydroponically or there's,
Some can be. Well, there's a couple of things. One is like for the Killingly, they say for water consumption and the handling of wastewaters, those you have to provide something. That's not if necessary. Waste management, that's not if necessary. They want to know how you handle that. So,
what's going into the waste, if it rains out, the dumpster leaks, where does it go? What's being thrown in the dumpster, don't know.
Yeah, they're probably using a lot of nitrogen,
Could be,
so you don't want all that
right.
heavy nitrogen wastewater.
And so if you got
You can dump on
dealing
the
with
ground.
bags, they're throwing bags, dumpster, it rains.
imagine with any fertilizer, it's gonna be the end. You
Don't have any nitrogen in your water, let it leave.
So. You have to
Ideally,
worry
there's
about
no
that.
nitrogen in your water, that leaves.
Right,
But again, for example, the Killingly regs, in some other towns, I've seen this as well. They want to know what's happening with your wastewater and
Sure.
that type of stuff. It's not, if necessary, it's like.
now,
gotta
if this
tell.
was in the middle of some small gentleman farm, it would be quite such an impact, but you start stuffing this in a residential where you got a house 500 feet beside of you. And, what's happening to the wastewater? Affects it as well.
And yeah, and also what it will do to any of the water.
Right.
Absolutely.
You're growing something, you're fertilizing.
Wouldn't the Department of Agriculture get involved? I mean, they get involved with how other farms are managing their nutrient. So I think they would get involved with that too.
We can still,
But they're not, but again, if you're deciding somebody's big home garden, probably bag is always. Checking with everybody's home garden that they grow.
Right, but the cost of the license from the state is probably gonna exceed what someone would wanna do for a home garden. Scale of business.
You never know.
Never know, it depends on how profitable the product is per pound or whatever too, you may not need a whole. They get the minimum sizes and there are big gardens out there too, so that, but I'm just saying, whether or not the Department of Ag has to get involved in the grow, I don't know, that may be in the state regs and in the license.
Whatever the state has to do, the state has to do. You might have, marked special blend and you don't have to grow much of it to be profitable, who knows?
Fertilize that.
Now, they're not gonna require a nutrient management plan.
Dean?
Kind of going a little away from this, but there's a lot of companies that use, it's not cannabis, it's hemp for soil remediation. Would we have, do you think at some point come up with something that falls under that too?
Well, hemp has a different designation. That's
I know.
allowed by the feds.
Yeah.
Some years ago, the agriculture bill allowed it.
So that,
So there's a difference between
Completely
hemp and. I don't think hemp falls under this. Like, we can ask Rich, but I don't think hemp would. Rich, hemp, we wouldn't be getting into with the cannabis stuff.
No,
Exactly.
it's defined out of this statute.
We'll go crazy with hemp then.
I don't have the time to do that.
We'll go crazy then.
But no, I've read it's, takes a lot of heavy metals out of soil and stuff.
Really? I didn't
I'm
know.
assuming at some point, it's gonna become pretty popular to use.
Sid?
Along those same lines, and we've talked about this with other types of applications. The expansion from the original use. So let's say a retail shop opens up, then they start selling whatever. Pipes, paper, lighters, that expands into t-shirts, hats. That expands into, I don't know what else, soft drinks. On and on and on.
Bar, barley posters.
Sure. Just a thought, don't know if we need to consider that or whether it's beyond the scope of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Delia?
Well, if it's a retail stores require a special permit, you are already requiring a special permit. So you could ask for the floor layout of where the items would be displayed and like how much it's gonna be cannabis related and how much is accessory sales item. But I don't know if you really need to regulate the accessory sales items, whether they're posters or t-shirts or whatever, that's not. That those items don't have cannabis in them, so they're just part of your regular special permitted retail use.
That's your 7-Eleven store.
Yeah, which may evolve into a Dollar Tree or
Right,
something
right.
11 and.
So you're thinking about, they come to us for a special permit, they just wanna be retail for cannabis.
Right.
They're not getting into all the other stuff, like, they don't wanna sell any, I wouldn't say paraphernalia, but. The stuff that you start getting to, here's a mug.
Right.
And stuff like that, and then later they start getting into that. They would need to come back to us for a modification, or that would all be built in Delia to. Just retail.
I think if they're proposing a size of the store. And as long as they're within the size of that store. Does it matter if they add some t-shirts and some mugs and whatever,
But you're thinking about what happens if it really becomes.
if it's beyond the size of what they originally proposed, then they come back. But if they have a store the size of this room and they start selling their own merchandise that's branded, like lots of businesses do, like farms might wanna, like their winery sell their name branded aprons or t-shirts or whatever. Would you really need to care? They're in the same space and they're selling non-cannabis items. Does it really matter? Do you have a special permit to have a retail store?
I think it's better than starting out as a t-shirt shop, expand into the cannabis instead.
Right.
That would be very different.
But if-
Right.
Back, they're limited by whatever their approval was. Their 1,000 square foot retail space, now they want to add. Another 1,000 foot, because now they want to add all these other items. Because expanding the size of their use. But if they were permitted for retail and the retail includes some items that have cannabis. Does it matter if they're selling a t-shirt or a mug or a hat or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know, I'm really on the fence, I just wanted to bring it up for
Yeah.
discussion in
think it's a
case
good point.
the commissioners or the public starts to be concerned about.
Yeah.
Something evolving into something else, and when does it cross that line, and are we concerned or are we not? What do we wanna do about it?
And just one thing, I know we have members of the public here. Are you here for the Airbnb? Because I'm not certain, given our hour, how much we're gonna be delving into that at this point. Just to let you know, because that's one of the hazards of our meetings. Depending upon what we're getting into, we're not usually here to like midnight. The town hall doesn't like it to be here too late anyway. So that's why I'm just asking if we're approaching close to 9:20. So we're still discussing candidates, but if we were to pivot to Airbnb, I'm not sure how much time we might pivot with. So the issue would be what the commission wishes to do. If we're gonna be taking Airbnb up and not candidates 2 weeks, that's our monthly meeting. We can reserve anything further about Airbnb for that meeting. As opposed to if we were to stop what we're doing and try to get in some Airbnb. Again, I open up the commission, I just don't know how much time we might have to delve into the Airbnb. I'll open it up to the commission. Did you have a question?
I did. The only reason we came was because we received an email from the Lake Association. Informing us that we are totally against all the rules and regulations of the town.
Can you just identify your name?
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Phyllis-
we have to get it on the record.
Yeah, Phyllis Lawton.
I'm not privy, this commission is not privy to whatever email you receive.
Yeah, I just didn't know our position because of the nature of the letter that I got received.
Yeah, that, I mean, we're not taking up anything about that letter. We've not received any communication about that.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't know. if
that
you
would
did.
be at this, that comes up at our monthly business meetings.
Okay.
If there was some letter you received that you feel you need to talk with the zoning enforcement officer about,
Mhm.
he's back in
Yeah,
on
we
Monday.
did.
Okay,
Yeah, we were suggested to come here because.
by the zoning enforcement officer?
Oh,
He didn't tell me.
no.
Oh, yeah.
no. Yeah, an attorney for the lakes.
The letter attached.
Yeah, and we just didn't know our position because of the nature and. the-
Yeah, so we can't speak to, because we are not, the commission at this point is not privy to whatever that communication was.
I thought you had and
No,
we were gonna be told something.
no,
Wow, because the letter was pretty.
that wouldn't be coming up at this, that wouldn't be coming up at this meeting anyway.
Oh,
This is a planning
Yeah.
meeting, not our, so. in a
well, that's
sense-
fine, right?
And we haven't heard from the zoning enforcement officer, so it may be something the zoning enforcement
Oh.
officer is handling.
Yeah.
And not at a point to inform us.
Yeah.
So no, that wouldn't
Yeah.
be coming up tonight.
Well, I was kind of informed to.
What was the date of the email?
I received nothing from Dan.
Yeah,
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
No.
So
So,
maybe some heavy implication, when they better shut the doors down.
yeah, well, that
So that's why we came.
we would not be taking up tonight.
Okay,
No.
okay, that's a good thing.
So just let the commission know that we've not received any communication from the zoning enforcement officer on that. So
Okay, all right, that's fine.
getting into where we are from, so if that's why you were here, we wouldn't be, whether or not that would come up in 2 weeks at our monthly business meeting, you're gonna have to find out from the zoning enforcement officer. He may be looking into it and not at a point to let
Yeah,
us know,
he's seen the letter.
so we'll just have to go accordingly.
Okay. As long as I know my.
I've not heard anything from the zoning enforcement officer about this coming up at our meeting yet. But Joe,
Yeah, he reminded me, you said your name's Phyllis Lawton.
Yes,
You're one of the applicants,
yes,
and the application was discussed at the last meeting,
yes,
and the determination was to table the application.
exactly.
so it's still after,
So you're still allowed to continue doing what
Yes.
you're doing, understanding it's not compliant till we come up with regulations.
Yes, that was our
So that's-
understanding.
That's the,
But you got an email from the Lake Association?
Yeah, from an attorney
so
representing.
I would just say, because it came from an attorney.
Yeah.
We can't discuss it.
Right.
So what's gonna have to happen is,
Okay.
if the zoning enforcement officer has received it. It came from an attorney, the zoning enforcement officer will have to handle it. That may not require the zoning enforcement officer contacting the town attorney. If that so happens, that is considered privileged communication until we spoke to make it public.
Yeah.
So we can't have any discussion. I would say no discussion about that can be had.
Okay,
What we'll do is on Monday, even though he's not, the zoning enforcement officer not in office, I can still reach out to him as chair.
Yeah.
Ask him, what is the status? So we just know a status, but I'm sure he's doing whatever he needs to do That wouldn't be coming at this point.
We're just trying to stay in compliance.
I understand.
So I figured we better come after reading that letter.
Right.
It was a
So
pretty
again,
powerful letter.
we can't comment upon that, and we're not gonna get into that at all tonight.
That's fine, good.
But otherwise, we'll see where we are, but go Adeletta's point is well taken. We do have your application still as active. We've tabled it. We have said on the record that you are non-compliant. Can't expand what you're doing,
Mhm,
but we're allowing it as we're working
right,
actively on regulations. Depending on what those regulations are, your application then would have to follow it. But we have not made any determination at this point to say shutting you down. And I thought that was clear.
It's total zoning, but if the lake association.
That's different.
Right, that's different.
The Lake Association is a private association.
Mhm.
You have to abide by their rules, and we did discuss this for anybody. We discussed this at the last meeting. If they're in their purview to say yes or no, separate from zoning. But they can't override our zoning sense. So if they're saying you're not allowed because the town doesn't allow it. This committee, they have no, that's us to determine. We've already been
that
on the
was
record.
kind of
what we're doing.
suggested, that's why.
So right now, what I will say is, we'll see what the zoning enforcement offers is
Okay.
doing and let that process
Okay.
go. But that's why we wouldn't be able to really get into that.
No, understood, understood.
But no, I appreciate everything that you just said, totally. But we needed to have you know what was going on. That was our point.
Well, thank you. And then, as chair, unless there's an objection, I'll follow up with our zoning enforcement officer. Just to let him know we've been notified, but we've not seen anything.
Okay.
Don't share that with any commissioner. That has to just be with the zoning enforcement officer. And verify that he's received it and he's doing whatever process he needs to do.
Okay.
That's exactly what we did.
At an appropriate time, he lets us know, but if it gets into anything that we have to have legal counsel review, there's that process.
Well, it came with the letterhead.
Yeah, but when we talk about legal,
Threats and all the good stuff.
when we talk
I'm
about
fine,
legal
this is
counsel, we
great.
talk about the town.
I never know what's coming.
So we've been informed, it's sad. And I'll follow up with the CEO to let him know. And then we've been informed and then, but again, please don't share that with commissioners because we don't want to get into, we just have to let it handle with
Yeah,
that, with the
Yeah,
town.
that's fine.
So,
Thank you. Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
but we are taking back up what we're gonna do about Airbnb regulation in 2 weeks.
Okay, good.
So,
Well, I learned a lot about Canada. Those places are huge. My son works out in the Huntington Beach kind of. Like the industry.
it's a big industry, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's an
Okay.
interesting person. Okay, good night.
Have a good night. What is the commit, as far as, is there anything, so do we want to have Delia? Based upon what we have here and what we've been providing draft, what she thinks might be things that we might want to have in? And-
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd like to see, add to that, looking at the definitions, there's one, McKinley, that talks about a producer. I just want to see how is a producer, which is funded for cannabis for medicinal use, is that different than a cultivator or agriculture? Or why is that? And is there another name for somebody who grows cannabis for recreation?
let me ask,
What definition are you talking about?
But it's not defined. I mean, they don't say recreation.
and we don't need to have our definition.
Filled out.
So which two definitions are you asking about? Cultivator and producer?
Well, a producer is specific to growing for medicinal use.
Let me ask Rich Roberts here, Rich. In the state statute, do they make a big distinction? And we have to come up with definitions between what is being grown and sold for recreational versus what's being grown and sold purely for, I guess for lack of a better term, medicinal, even though it's not technically FDA approved. That we have to come up with regulations because the state has whatever distinctions.
I think you'll want to follow the state's distinctions in your regulations, just so that there's no confusion.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, as a practical matter, I think producers quite often are generating the stuff for the recreational facilities as well. They're selling them through hybrid dispensaries that do both recreational and medical, at least at this point.
okay. So what we'll do is, we already have definitions, we'll look at those, and we can see if there's anything additional to add. But that is a point we'll need to make certain we're clear what we're discussing when it comes to recreational versus quote unquote medicinal. So some places use the term tailored to define that. Okay, we'll make a note of that. I'm not certain why they have the person there. I don't know. But we can see where we stand with the definitions. Okay. Did we want to? I know I try to be mindful of the time. Do we want to continue on with this, or? It's 9:30. I'm happy to stay. I just don't know what people want to do.
Only because I think we're talking about discussing Airbnb topics at our next meeting. Just going through a lot of the literature that was sent out. It seems like there's an opportunity to either have very long regulations on short-term rentals, or at least get a lot of definitions. The different cities and towns put different restrictions on it or definitions. So if there's a way to kind of summarize some of the definitions that are in different towns, regulations. Simple as Airbnb, VRBO, short-term rentals, hosted, non-hosted, long-term rentals that include leases, so it's a transient home away, a boarding house, rooming house. Other topics that came up was some towns started with an ordinance for these as a better way of handling short-term rentals versus zoning regulations.
Do we want to have zoning in an ordinance?
No, it's just an ordinance.
We had talked about wanting to look at the Ashford regulations
Yeah,
and use that as a template, not the copy, but just.
I
for our
understand,
discussion.
but there's a difference between having a town ordinance versus the zoning regulations, pros and cons. There. Short-term rentals of accessory dwellings were prohibited, so as we spent a lot of time talking about accessory dwellings. It's just different towns have prohibited using those dwelling units as short-term rentals.
When we take this up in 2 weeks, we can delve more into it.
I'm
Yeah.
just mentioning this so as maybe we can have a little bit more information about it.
We can see what we might be able to get in time for that meeting. We'll see where we stand. I have to take a look again at the Ashford ones to see what they got into with some of that stuff. That was one of the ones we wanted to show on the screen.
Well, I
Yeah, we-
did a lot of different towns,
Yeah.
regulations, so you can review those and see how the different approaches and different definitions and stuff are.
Okay. So did we want to continue on with cannabis tonight, or we've done enough and we will start working on some? So we can see some draft wording and identify where the zoning regs, we know we're gonna have to put some things in and make some changes. We okay where we are tonight? Dwight? Dave, you're okay with where we've gotten to tonight? Okay. Okay. So, Airbnb then will take up, in 2 weeks. We'll note that. And then, that takes in home occupation or mentioned, so that takes us to, technically, Doug left at some point, so we do have an opening for an alternate, so without objection, for purposes of voting on what will be our next motion, which would be to adjourn. I'll see Dwight, if that's okay with you, if you would like to vote on the adjournment. So.
I'd like to make a comment.
That sounds good.
I want to wish everybody, in addition to Groundhog Day, I want to wish everybody a happy National Tater Tot Day.
Let's get that in on the minute.
And if we're talking about that, tomorrow is National Go Red Day. For Women's Heart Health, and it's also National Women's Physician Day. And I know that because I'm gonna need to make certain I say Happy National Women's Physician Day to my wife. And I do that every year. So, but do remember that that is the day, February 5th.
Does everybody know what part of the potato they make tater tots from?
Do we want to know?
Not the eyes.
My place, Total Red Day is, you take somebody for a ride in an initial track. Well, what part does the tater tot come from?
The best part, Joe.
Part-
Same thing with fish sticks. How much of the best part of the fish?
I'm sure.
Now you're sorry you asked? So, Commissioner Young, did you want to make a motion? Move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
I am surprised that you seconded it, but nevertheless, I will note. So Tim Young made a motion to adjourn, Mark Blackmer seconded. I have to technically go through the roll because we have some people online, so Joe Adeleto.
Aye.
Mark Blackmer.
Aye.
Sid Logic. Jeff Gordon, I'm actually gonna vote aye on that. Where are we? Jeff Markon.
Aye.
David Morse.
Aye.
Joe Palula.
Aye.
He's not here. Dwight Reinowitz.
Aye.
Timothy Young.
Aye.
We're so adjourned, whatever time you have, Aiden. Thank you, everybody. And I gotta get this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Take care.